Hello students, my name is Gargi and in this video lecture we are going to study the chapter The Best Christmas Present in the World of our book Honeydew. Okay, so students of class 8th, let's start. I am going to tell you the summary of the chapter and then we are going to discuss a few question answers, and we also have word meanings. So when you read the chapter, they are going to help you if you get stuck anywhere. Okay, so let's start with the summary. The story, The Best Christmas Present in the World, begins with the author making a decision about buying an old roll-top desk. So, our author, who goes to a junk shop, and he decides that he is going to buy a roll-top desk, right? So, that roll-top desk was not in a very good condition. Okay, it had burnt marks all over and it was poorly mended. So he was it was difficult for him to make that decision कि वो उसे खरीदना चाहते हैं या नहीं. But he always wanted a roll top desk, so he decided to buy it anyway. Now, which is in a bad condition. He had longed for one since long, and he was also confident that he could restore it. Now, he was very confident about it कि वो उसे ठीक कर सकते हैं, जो उसकी इतनी बुरी हालत में है वो, so he can restore it. He was confident about it, right? So he buys it. Thus he takes the desk home, and as he starts working on it on the eve of Christmas, now he starts working on that desk on a Christmas Eve, and as he starts working on it on the eve of Christmas, he finds a secret drawer that carried a letter addressed to some woman named Connie from her husband Jim. Now, उस डेस्क में एक ड्रॉर होता है जो कि सीक्रेट ड्रॉर होता है, ओके, एंड वो इजीली खुल नहीं रहा होता है. सो ही पुट सम फोर्स इन देयर एंड वो उसे ओपन करते हैं और उन्हें क्या मिलता है, एक ब्लैक कलर का टिन बॉक्स मिलता है जिसके ऊपर सेलो टेप्ड एक पेपर होता है एंड उस पर लिखा होता है कि वो लेटर कॉनी के लिए लिखा है. किसने? उनके हस्बैंड जिम ने. ओके, सो आफ्टर दैट it said that it was his last letter and was dated December 26, 1914. Okay, 1914 में उन्होंने वो जिम ने अपनी वाइफ कॉनी के लिए वो लेटर लिखा था. Now as we can see 1914, तो ये जो स्टोरी है वो जो लेटर में जो भी वो मेंशन करते हैं वो किस टाइम का होता है? दैट इज फ्रॉम वर्ल्ड वॉर 1. ओके, ये जो डेट है वो वर्ल्ड वॉर 1 के टाइम की है. Okay, so it was written at the time of the war between Germany and Britain. It listed the day of Christmas that year 1914 or a wonderful thing that had happened. उन्होंने उसके अंदर क्या मेंशन किया था कि उसमें एक बहुत अच्छी चीज़ हुई जो वो अपनी वाइफ को बताना चाहते हैं. जिम के साथ एक बहुत अच्छी सी कोई चीज़ हुई है जो वो अपनी वाइफ कॉनी के साथ शेयर करना चाहते हैं. He wrote about how the two armies came together to celebrate the spirit of Christmas despite belonging to enemy nations. वो दोनों Germans and Britishers दोनों अलग अलग enemies थे, right? दोनों war में थे और enemies थे, but they came together and they celebrated Christmas at that time. So it was a wonderful thing that had happened, क्योंकि war के बीच में ऐसे दोनों enemies एक साथ आके Christmas celebrate करें तो बहुत बड़ी चीज़ होती है. So that's what he wanted to share with his wife. They forgot about their differences for a while and realized that they had much in common. They shared schnapps, sausages and rum. So they shared their ration and their drinks and food and everything, and they had a lot in common. When they talked, they had a lot in common. After that, two officers, Jim and Hans Wolf. Now Jim here is the British officer and Hans Wolf is the German officer, developed a good bond over chit chat. So they started talking while the other soldiers, they were having this football match and they were talking to each other. They both were of the views that countries should negotiate peacefully and resolve conflicts by playing football or cricket. Now what they thought, what were their thoughts कि जो armies हैं उन्हें वॉर की जगह अपने जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है वो कैसे रिजॉल्व कर लेने चाहिए? मे बी विद अ फुटबॉल मैच और अ क्रिकेट मैच. The soldiers played football that day, and when all their supply of food and drinks was finished, they knew it was time to return back to their own trenches. और जब उनके सारे ड्रिंक्स और फुटबॉल मैच और जो फूड होता है वो सब खत्म हो जाता है, सो दे न्यू इट्स टाइम टू गो बैक टू रियलिटी, इट्स टाइम टू गो बैक टू द वॉर, एंड अब वो वापस से एनिमीज बन जाएंगे. नाउ दैट नाइट दे एक्सचेंज क्रिसमस कैरल्स, और रात में उन्होंने क्रिसमस कैरल्स भी अपने अपने ट्रेंचेस से एक्सचेंज किए. And after that, as Jim tells Connie about the day in his letter, he assures Connie of their reunion next Christmas. The author who read this letter thought he should reach out to Connie. Now, when Jim was writing this letter, so he ends the letter by saying that next Christmas we'll be together, Connie, and we'll celebrate the next Christmas together. Now, when the author reads this letter, he has this urge. He thought that the right thing to do is to find Connie and return this letter to her, because as he read the letter, he understood that the letter is very important to Connie. So he decided that he is going to find Connie and return the letter to her. He finds the address mentioned on the envelope and discovers that the house had been burnt, and Connie, a 101 years old lady who now lived in a nursing home. Now, when he goes to find Connie, जो उस पेपर पे जो सेलो टेप था टिन बॉक्स से, वो उस पेपर पे लिखे हुए एड्रेस पे जाता है, एंड ही फाइंड्स आउट कि वो जो हाउस है इट्स बीन कम्प्लीटली बर्न आउट, एंड कॉनी इज नाउ लिविंग इन अ नर्सिंग होम. सो ही विजिट्स द नर्सिंग होम. अब वो क्या करता है, वो जाता है और वो नर्सिंग होम विजिट करता है, ठीक है. सो व्हेन ही गोज टू नर्सिंग होम, ही फाइंड्स दैट हैंड्स ओवर द लेटर टू कॉनी, who is immensely overjoyed on reading the letter. Now, Connie, as she is 101 years old, she is not in her senses, not always, okay. So, she is a bit confused all the time. So, when he goes to her, she is still confused. But as soon as she looks at that letter, she remembers every single thing, right? And she has this happiness on her face, which is so visible, which is so obvious. So she misunderstands the author to be her husband Jim and calls him the best Christmas present in the world. Now, when she looks at the author, so as we know that she is confused, तो वो क्या करती है, उनको जो author है उसे Jim से confuse कर लेती है. She thinks that author is Jim. And last letter में जैसे कि जिम ने लिखा था कि we'll be together the next Christmas, और obviously ये वाला जो टाइम है वो क्रिसमस का है, तो कॉनी को ऐसा लगता है कि वो ऑथर जिम है जो कि वापस आ गया है वॉर से, as he promised her, and she calls him the best Christmas present in the world, as our topic is, as the title of our story is, okay. So that was the summary of the chapter. Very nice story, and we also have word meanings. So when you read the chapter, if you don't know the meaning of any particular word, you can look and you can find all these words here, right? So we have all the words. Now let's discuss the question answers. Let's discuss a few question answers from the chapter. The first question is, what did he find in a secret drawer? Who do you think had put it in there? Now he is the author here. So the question is कि author को secret drawer में क्या मिलता है, and who do you think had put it there? किसने वहाँ उसको रखा था? So as we know, the author found a small box, black tin box. उसे एक small सा black color का tin box मिलता है in a secret drawer. There was a paper sellotaped to its top. It said, Jim's last letter received January 25th, 1915 to be buried with me when the time comes. Now she has written on it, okay, bury it with me. When I die, when you bury me, bury the letter with me. Most likely it was put there by Mrs. Jim McPherson, who was Jim's wife. Now Mrs. Jim McPherson, as we know the name also, Connie, must have put it there, and her name and address were on the envelope inside the box. और उसका जो address है और name है वो भी उस पेपर पे जो सेलो टेप था बॉक्सेस पे लिखा हुआ था, ओके. Let's look at the next question. Who had returned the letter, to whom and when? अभी the first question is who had returned the letter. Letter किसने लिखा था? Jim McPherson ने लिखा था. And to whom? To his wife Connie, Mrs. McPherson. And when? When कब लिखा था? December 26, 1914. Okay. Now let's look at the next question. Why was the letter written? What was the wonderful thing that had happened? क्यों लिखा था उन्होंने वो लेटर? जिम ने वो लेटर क्यों लिखा था? So Jim wrote the letter to tell his wife about the wonderful thing that had happened. Jim wanted to share the wonderful thing that had happened with his wife Connie. And the British and the Germans were engaged in a war. Yet on this day means on the Christmas day, both the troops met in no man's land. No man's land में वो लोग मिले थे. And it was a thing of wonder because right in the middle of the war, the warring soldiers were making peace. अब वो जो warring soldiers थे, they were making peace. बिल्कुल war के बीच में, the war चल ही रही थी, तब they came together to celebrate Christmas, and it was the wonderful thing that had happened, and Jim wanted to share it with Connie. Okay, let's look at the last question. Do you think Jim McPherson came back from the war? How do you know this? Now, as we know that on the letter, she had written, bury it with me, and it was also written that last letter received from Jim and bury it with me when the time comes. So, from that last letter received from Jim. So, by that we can understand that if the last letter, so maybe this must have happened that Jim did not come back, right? So, no, it is most likely that Jim McPherson did not come back from the war. The note paper sellotaped to the tin box mentioned the letter contained in the box to be the last letter from Jim. This was perhaps the last that Connie heard from him. क्योंकि उसके बाद maybe उसने कोई letter नहीं लिखा, and maybe something must have happened during the war. Maybe he must have died during the war. So that was the last letter, and that was the last time she heard from Jim. So by that we can understand that Jim did not come back. And as the end goes, in the last few passages of the chapter, when the author goes to meet Connie, so Connie misunderstands the author from Jim, right? वो उसे जिम समझ लेती है. So अगर जिम वापस ही आ गया होता तो वो ऑथर को जिम क्यों समझती, right? So by all these things we can understand that maybe Jim did not come back from the war, and that's why Connie had written the last letter on that paper, and that's why she misunderstood that the author was Jim. Okay, so by these things we all can make an idea that Jim did not come back from the war. Okay, so I hope you understood the chapter, guys. Read the chapter line by line, and it's a very easy chapter, and I hope you understood it, and you can use the word meanings so that it's going to be helpful कि अगर आप किसी भी word में फंस जाएं अगर और आपको meaning समझ में ना आए तो आप इन सारे words को use करके इनके meaning सबके आगे लिखे हुए हैं तो आप उनसे समझ सकते हैं पूरे chapter को. Okay, I'll meet you in our next lecture with a next topic. Okay, thank you.